Hello everyone, thank you so much for joining the webinar. My name is Khurram Gulistan. I'm the founder and CEO of VinnCorp. VinnCorp is a remote talent provider for US-based businesses and enterprises. Prior to joining VinnCorp, I was working at Salesforce, where I helped manage their multi-petabyte scale cloud storage for a couple of years. And for 3 years, I worked at their analytics cloud, and we helped it go from 20 mil to 100 mil in 3 years. And prior to that, I was working at Microsoft. So with me, I have Mr. Munir Usman. He is the founder of the company called Interview.io. It's a very successful business in its domain. And before that, he had the company Pi Labs, which he sold to start this business. And I have Mr. Michael Parkin. He has more than 30 years of experience, and with like more than 14 years in C-level roles. He's currently running Apical Technologies, and before that, he had a company which provided fractional CTOs, and it was profitable from day one, by the way. And I have with me Mr. Usman Ghani. Usman is the co-founder of Even, and Even is a unicorn. From zero to unicorn, they went in hardly 3.5 years. That's pretty amazing, actually. And before that, he built his company Scotty Labs, Scotty.ai, which was acquired by DoorDash. And he worked at Microsoft before that, and he helped. He was in the founding team of Windows Azure, and he helped Azure go from zero to $1 billion in a pretty short time frame, actually. Usman also serves on due diligence panels of different VC firms. So the agenda for today is that we'll be presenting a roadmap from job to startup, and we'll be going through the individual items in the roadmap. And after this, we'll have a panel discussion on various areas pertaining to uh, starting your own company, basically. So before we go further, we need to understand what exactly is a startup. What's the difference between a startup and a typical business, right? So startup is also obviously it's also a business, right? But the reason why we use a different term for it is that when we say startup, we imply a business which is designed for exponential growth. The concept is that it will go from zero to say tens of millions of dollars, if not hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue in like 4 or 5 or maybe 7 years time frame, right? It has to have some sort of uniqueness to the offering. So you may study the competitive landscape and take features from different competitors, but you have to have at least one or two unique dimensions to your offering, right? And that's what helps you make it grow fast, right? And it has to be at least 10 times better than competition, because that's how you can build a fast growing business, right? Because you have to have a significant competitive edge in one dimension at least. The question is that, why grow fast anyway? I mean, if say you have 10 or 20 million dollars, you can pretty much buy anything, right? You can buy a home, you can have a good life for your kids, you can buy any car, right? Why do you need such fast growth and such big numbers, right? So the thing is that when you have a unique innovation, and if you don't push your accelerator to go all the way, then somebody else will, right? Somebody else will take the market that you are not aggressively taking, right? And sooner or later their offering will eventually supersede yours, and they may eventually either take all your customers and leave you with zero revenue, right? Or they may eventually out innovate you so much that nobody has an incentive to use your offering, right? So you might as well use your first mover advantage and capture all the market while you can, right? So, and when you want to grow fast, right, you want to raise capital because you may not be able to bootstrap all the way, right? So when you want to raise capital, then you have to go to either VCs or high net worth individuals, or other players in that category, basically, right? So what happens is that these VCs, when they raise their fund, say a VC raises $100 million fund, right? So what happens is that the VC will invest that fund into 100 different companies, right? Today, even like we see seed rounds of like $5 million, right? So it's not uncommon to have $1 million seed round. It's actually pretty normalized these days, right? So if a VC invests in 100 startups, right, $1 million each, then the likelihood is that 80 or 90 will fail outright, and 9 will just barely do the average business, and one unicorn will come out of it, right? One would be an outlier success, right? And that outlier success has to return the investment on the whole fund, basically, right? So the ROI that's expected, I mean, even if you put $100 million in S&P 500, in 7 years it will get you 2.6 2.7 times of your investment, right, with very low risk. But uh, but if you're taking a risk and you are doing this VC model, right, you would expect more return, right? So generally 4 to 5 times ROI is expected from a VC fund, right? So that unicorn will basically provide the return on the whole fund, right? If you are walking into a VC office, if you are having a meeting with a VC and you are raising funding, you have to have an idea that can potentially return on the whole fund. You are raising $1 million, but you should have the vision and the plan that if things go according to plan, eventually you may, you're not promising, but you may end up returning 200, 300, or $500 million against that $1 million investment, right? So once you understand this basic, right, that's when you can effectively pitch to VCs, right? And if you don't have this big of a vision, right, it will be very hard to raise funding when you are actually ready to raise funding. So what's the roadmap from corporate job to a startup? These are the steps that we identified in our experience. And interestingly, the first 5 of them can be done with your job, with your full-time job, right? Number 6 and number 7, they require full-time attention from you, but you can take some time off from your job. You can apply for a sabbatical. You can figure out different ways to make that work, right? So when I quit my job at Salesforce, I talked to my boss. I was working with my boss for a promotion, right? So I asked my boss that instead of giving me a promotion, please give me 3 months sabbatical, right? And he was very understanding of my situation. I told him that I wanted to start a business, and if it succeeded, I will probably not come back, right? So my boss understood my situation and he gave me that sabbatical, and I then founded VinnCorp. So you can always talk to your boss, be upfront about it, be transparent about it, right? And you get some time off for your uh, business, right? For starting your business, right? But for the last 2 steps, you have to be all in. You cannot have corporate job. You cannot have any backup plan. You have to be fully prioritized and focused on your business, right? In fact, for your business to become successful, at least by that time, I would say actually by step 6, your business should become the highest priority in your life. If your business is not highest priority in your life, you know what? It may not succeed, right? So what's the very first step? The very first step is that you have a lot of ideas, and you don't want to be tunnel vision, by the way. It's possible that you have one idea that you think that, oh, this will change the world, right? But you have to have the broad-mindedness that the, the very first idea you might have may not be the best one. You have to put all ideas that you can have on the table, jot them on down on the paper, right? Have as many ideas as you can, right? and then evaluate them, study them, dig deeper into them, right? So so for example, right, um, I mean, it's a great video there on YouTube, that how Elon Musk basically explained how about his idea of the boring company, right? So what happens is that when you have this idea, first of all, you have to put a dollar amount to it, right? How big is this problem that you want to solve? And by the way, if your technology, if your idea is not solving any real problem, right, you may not, you know what, it may not be worth even trying it out, right? Because if you're not solving a real problem, you know why would anybody pay you for your solution, right? If you're not making anybody's life easier, why would anybody purchase your product or service, right? So first you have to put a dollar amount in front of your problem, and then you have to see how your problem, how your solution can be 10 times better than a competition. And if you look at the video, right, the link is shared, uh, you will see Elon Musk very clearly explaining how Boring Company is at least 10 times better than competition. He basically argues that by reducing the width of the diameter of the tunnel, the tunneling cost is reduced 4 times, right? So that's 4 times better already, right? Then he's saying that it's 2x, even more better by increasing the power of the tunneling machinery, right? So when you're 2x more faster, right, then you are saving time, and as you save time, you save money, right? And then he says that in current tunneling technology, you have to put reinforcements in the tunnel, you know you have to stop digging and put reinforcement in the tunnel time to time, right? Because if you don't put reinforcement, the tunnel will just collapse, right? So you dig a little bit, you put reinforcements, you dig, you put reinforcements, right? What he's saying that his machinery would put the reinforcements as they dig, right? That will make the process 2x faster. So that becomes 16 times faster and better solution than the current technology, right? That's how, so it's a very simple math, right? But you have to be clear in your head how your idea is 10 times better than the competition. And if it's not better, it's going to be hard to uh, build the hockey stick curve that you want, right? The next point is that your idea ideally should be unique in one or two dimensions. You can take features from different competitors, but you have to have your unique innovation in one or two dimensions that makes your idea better, right? And then another important point to understand here is that there are a lot of domains, which keep emerging, which become, hot and cool, right? So what happens is that as the technology advances, right, different types of solutions become possible, right? Different types of solutions which were not possible with the state of the art earlier start becoming possible, right? For example, when um, when the CPU costs went down, when the computer machinery costs went down, all of a sudden we started seeing this ginormous networking websites, right? We started, when internet came out, a whole bunch of technologies became possible, like like email, search, and all these things, right? But when further the cost of hardware went down, we started seeing a lot of networking, so sites coming on board, right? Then we saw this whole web 3.0 types of companies coming, right? We saw a boom of cloud computing companies as well, right? So all these booms, right, they are funded by VCs. When a new dimension of technology gets unlocked, right, a lot of VCs put in money in the startups in that space, ideas in that space. But with certain amount of time, that space starts getting filled up, right? A lot of gaps in that space, they become covered by different startups and companies. They then consolidate to make that field pretty mature, right? So when the dimension of the technology is unlocked, then you have a blue ocean But when a lot of money has been poured into it, a lot of startups have been found, a lot of startups have failed in that domain, right? Then you can call it being closer to a red ocean, right? So when you're coming up with an idea and your idea is pertaining to something or some technology that was hot 15 years ago or maybe 10 years ago, right? You have to do a lot of, introspection and a lot of competitive analysis to really understand if it's unique that you're thinking, right? Because there's a high likelihood that somebody else tried it and failed, and or they tried it, it succeeded, and it just became a very obscure feature of some product that you are not even looking at those details, maybe, right? So you have to really, really, really look at the competitive landscape and understand how unique your innovation and how unique your idea really, really is, right? This is a big cause of a lot of failures, because by the time you spend 6 months or 4 months building your technology, you bring it to market, all of a sudden you realize that you have an obscure competitor who is already produced a killer technology, like much better than what you imagined many years ago, right? So you have to do a competitive research pretty thoroughly. The next thing you want to look at about your idea is that, what is the total addressable market of your idea? If the whole world becomes your client and everybody starts using your solution, right, how big the problem total is, right? How much money will you get if you get every possible customer in the world, right? It should be at least in billions, if not in hundreds of billions of dollars, right? Then the next thing you want to look at would be, what is the service addressable market? Now you have to understand that when you are starting a business, when you're launching your business, you know we we as technology people, we become very, you know uh, very agnostic to the fact that, what, if we build a website, it can be viewed in the whole world, right? So maybe our business can run in the whole world. No, every geography has is a barrier to entry, right? It is not easy to scale business from one country to another to another to another, right? Every business cannot be scaled like seamlessly in the whole world, right? So you have to identify your initial geography where you wanna capture the market, right? That becomes, if you're looking at USA, right, it becomes your service addressable market, and you have to look at specifically what kind of customers would be your customers, right? That becomes your service addressable market, right? And then service obtainable market is a bottoms up calculation, that if each customer is paying you, say, you know $1 million every year, and you get every year you're getting, say, um, 10 new customers, you and it's additive in nature, the business is additive in nature, maybe in 5 years you will go from zero to $100 million, right? So you have to do a bottoms up math on how many customers can you target in first 4 or 5 years to reach from zero to a reasonable number, right? Generally, rule of thumb is around $100 million SOM, but obviously you have to be very realistic about your business, right? Because this is your roadmap. This is what you are gonna be doing for the next 4, 5, 6 years, right? So the more accurate your information is, the more accurate your targets are, the more accurate your roadmap is, the higher chance of success you have. Because on this SOM number, your whole plan for next 4 or 5 years will be laid out, right? And the more clear you can be about your plan, the more you know um, the more you can execute with excellence, the more chances of success you have, right? So it's very important to do this math right, to do this estimation as best as you can. Obviously you're not going to spend endless time on it, but you have to have a very good understanding of where you want to be. And obviously, if your SOM ends up being too small, maybe it's not the right idea for you. Maybe it won't be the right idea for your business. Or maybe you can look at that, can I do this whole thing without raising any funding? Because, if you're not looking to raise funding, you can build your lifestyle business. It may not be a startup, but it will be a good lifestyle business, giving you a healthy return. Nothing wrong with that, but you have to keep that in mind, that you'll have to plan accordingly. Then you go out with your idea and talk to your potential clients, right? See the problem that you envisioned, see the problem that you thought, how people think about it, right? Because you may think something is a big problem, but end user, he may or may not agree with you, right? If you find people agreeing with you, if you find them committing you, yes, they will pay to use your solution, right? Then you have something concrete, you know, that can be worked upon, right? So you have to carefully socialize your idea to the right people, and you have to do a little bit of selling to get a buy-in, right? And obviously, you have to make sure that when you're selling something, you can make money, right? You have a gross margin, a healthy gross margin, right? Rule of thumb, I would say, is that if you have a less than 35% gross margin or less than 30% gross margin, it would be difficult to really build a business on top of it, right? Because you have to cover all your operational costs with your gross margin and you have to produce some net margin as well, right? So look for something that is in the range of 65%, 70% gross margin so that you can comfortably operationalize your business and have a good, eventually, good net margin as well. And remember, all of these steps you can do with your job. You don't have to quit your job to get started with all this research, right? So the next step would be that you, once you have your ideas evaluated, you have narrowed it down to one or two ideas that you really want to work upon, then you do your competitive research, right? Like I said before, that you cannot assume that what you're thinking is unique, right? You have to talk to domain experts. If you're not a domain expert, fine, but talk to somebody, right? You have to analyze, you make a chart of all these competition, right? Make a chart of different competitors. See if you can hire a product owner, right? So I mean, at VinnCorp, we provide very good quality product owners who can work on your behalf, who can do all this research, but you can find other companies as well whom you can hire remote product owners. They cost a fraction of what it costs in USA, but they will do as good a research as you require, right? And for example, we have brand equity, and we'll share the research for brand equity with you, right? You can look at Gartner Magic Quadrant for your area, and it will give you a good list of competitors, and then you can go from there to understand each competitor in more detail, right? So these are some of the areas that you can use for research, right? The point here is that you have to understand the features, the pricing, the strengths, weaknesses of all competitors. Use your competitor systems, use your competitive solutions, right? And see how good they really are. See if they're really missing those innovations that you're bringing to the market, right? Make sure that what you're bringing to the market is really unique and an order of magnitude better than what it is in the market today. At that point, you're ready to recruit your co-founders, right? Once you have the idea, once you have the vision, you're clear that what needs to be done, you've built yourself a clear, vision, you've built yourself a clear mission that this is what you're going to build over the next 4 or 5 years, and you know this is what you want, right? Then it becomes easier for you to talk to potential co-founders and see if you have people aligning with your vision and your mission, right? So it's a very long-term commitment. If you have a co-founder, you might be together for 7, 8, 10 years, right? So be careful, right? So the rule of thumb is that if you're looking for co-founders, always try to find people who have complementary skills than yours, right? Because if you have somebody whom you agree with all the time and you think exactly the same all the time, right? You know what? One of them is probably redundant, right? If you, both of you are product owners and you agree on everything that you guys say and do, you know what? One is not required, right? So so get somebody, if you have development background, get somebody from sales or marketing background. If you are a salesperson, get somebody from tech or marketing, right? So get complementary skills, get somebody whom you can really trust, right? Get somebody whom you can align with in your uh, you know um, way of working as well, right? And once you have somebody that you can go ahead as co-founder, right? Then uh, it's best and most recommended that for startups, that's recommended by Y Combinator, that you go to clerky.com, file your C corp, Delaware C corp, right? Open your company bank account, and whatever uh, pre-seed funding you want to put, as whatever investment you want to put, however small it can be, $20,000, $30,000, right? You guys want to put in, just put in that account, right? And that would be a good litmus test for your co-founder as well, because if your co-founder is not even putting in the $10,000, $15,000 you're asking him to start the business, right? You know what, maybe he or she is not the right co-founder for you, right? Because they are not putting their money where the commitment is, right? So, uh, so that's the best practice, that you make your co-founders commit to it and have a bank account and put money into it. That money becomes your runway basically. Then, once you have your idea finalized, you identify a team for yourself, right? So it's possible that you build everything yourself, right? But when you have a full-time job, it becomes very, very difficult to moonlight in the evenings and build, and code something up, right? Because in USA corporate sector, in especially in West Coast in tech companies, right, the jobs are not generally, cakewalk. Most companies, including Microsoft, including Amazon, Meta, Google, right, there are times when you really, really have to bend your back and really get shit done, right? And if your job is top priority, cannot really give time to uh, your startup, right? So it's best that you hire professionals to get your stuff done. And good news is that, at VinnCorp, we provide remote resources. You'll find more vendors who do that, right? Get yourself a good UX designer, get yourself a good front end, back end, mobile app developers, right? Get yourself project manager and make a proper Scrum team and get yourself going, right? And you can sign NDA with the company. They'll make sure that your intellectual property is kept secret. You have an agreement with them for development. Um, you have the ownership of intellectual property. It's legally enforceable, right? If you really want the company to work with you in the long term, if you really value the team, you can offer them some shares as well, so that they have like a pretty strong incentive to make your vision a success, right? So you can really bind them with your idea for long term, right? And you can also acquire that team down the road. It depends on your agreement with your vendor, but at VinCorp we do provide that option. And so this is a win-win situation where you start off with very minimal investment. You don't have to spend your time, effort, money and energy to hire this whole team, because just building the right team may take 6 months, right? So you get this team on day one, you give them your vision, you give them your thoughts, and they will start working on it, right? They will share you the mockups that look exactly like screenshots of what you will get eventually built, right? So you have an idea what you will eventually get, right? So you can make it as perfected as you like from day one, right? And then when you give it to developers, they will implement it as close to the mockups as humanly possible, right? And you have a project manager who takes care of all this process. So your job at the time, during the time of implementation, is that you have to push the team for excellence, right? You keep in touch on a weekly basis or a bi-weekly basis, however you feel comfortable, right? When you get demonstrated, right, you can ask for credentials, and you can test the stuff that is being built, right? And review, you can make sure that it is meeting your quality expectations, right? In parallel, you and your co-founders can work on building a community around your solution. See, if you want to sell something, it's best to either build your community or integrate into the target community, right? So it's important that you don't start on this aspect when you have the product ready, right? You start it early on, so that by the time you have your solution ready, you are ready to sell to a lot of people, right? And then use this time to get ready to be in the CEO or COO shoes when your startup is. you know in growth phase, right? When you're doing full time, right? So understand that yes, you are expert in one domain, but you may not have the knowledge of other domains, right? So educate yourself on finance, accounting, marketing, sales, all these areas at a high level. At least there are very good courses from Stanford, MIT, UC Berkeley, right, which teach all these to entrepreneurs, right? The courses are designed from entrepreneurship standpoint, that you are not doing a whole MBA, you are just learning enough to get your business properly managed, right? And it's not a whole lot of stuff, but still, some commitment is required to clear these courses, and it's really worth your time and effort to get it done. Okay, when your implementation is continuing, you can still do your full-time job while doing that, right? But when time comes that you are ready for launch, then you have to talk to your boss, take some time off, take a sabbatical, make sure that you have 2 3, if not maybe 4 months available, to really make sure that you are able to properly get your initial customers onboarded. You make the announcements, you make the noise, right? If you cannot handle a lot of customers, you create a wait list, and manually bring users from wait list to your actual solution, right? Handhold them into your solution, right? And you engage your communities to try out your product. Then you iterate with your customer base, with your clientele, to um, to make sure that you have a product market fit. This is probably the most important step in this whole cycle, right? That no matter how well you have planned, no matter how well you have executed, right, it's highly possible that you made a square while the market needed a circle, right? So you have to iterate, go back to a development team, make the changes that customers are recommending, and go back again, train your customers, learn from them, right? And just watch them, babysit them, use your product, right? And after few cycles, when you're confident that yes, your product is being used day in, day out by customers, it's solving the problem that you set out to solve, right? That's the point that you can declare success, right? When you have a sticky enough product that people use it without you asking them to use it on a regular cadence, that's when you have product market fit. And of course, they're willing to pay for it, right? So this would be a decision checkpoint for you, that whether you have a product market fit, whether your whole idea became successful in terms of solving the problem or not, right? You can decide at a point whether you want to quit your job and go all in, or you can decide that, you know what, this is not working, let me go back to the drawing board, right? And start all over again, right? Or, spend a couple of more years in your job and then think of something new, right? But this is the most important step. This is what differentiates successful startups from failed ones, successful solutions from failed ones, right? So you want to do that by using whatever leaves, sabbaticals, time off you have available to get yourself the product market fit. And as a founder, the amount of pain, the amount of effort that you can put in, nobody else will ever will, right? So you really need to, and all co-founders need to go all in at this point and really make sure that you have a product market fit. Okay, so you got a product market fit. You're confident that yes, this worked out. That's awesome, right? Now you decide that okay, I'm ready to go all in. I'm ready to start raising funding so that I can really make it big, right? At that point, you have to quit your job, right? You quit your job, you make sure that your business is now the highest priority in your life. And when you start your day, the first thing you think about is your business, right? And you start your day with your work, and make sure that the most productive hours of the day, the most productive time of the day is spent on your business, right? And then when you are in that phase, then you are actually ready to raise funding, right? Before spending a lot of time and effort on funding, you make sure that you understand fundraising process, take some tutorials, right? You can talk to us as well, can help you, but you have to understand the requirements from investors and requirements from VCs, and the rules of the game basically, right? And then either you can do investor outreach yourself. LinkedIn is a good tool. Get the paid version, reach out to a lot of people, right? And then if you reach out to 1,000 investors, maybe 100 or 200 will respond. Out of those, you can start engaging, and maybe 5 or 10 will eventually show interest. Out of 1 or 2 maybe convert, right? But once you have some conversions, it's easy to get subsequent fundings and fill your round, right? But it's a lot of time, effort, and perseverance that's required, right? It may take you a full year to actually do a proper fundraising, right? If you want to accelerate that, you can aim for going into different accelerators, which you pay to actually join, right? Like Draper University, like New Chip, like there are more like this, right? They basically introduce you to quite a few investors, right? So they basically fast track your journey to actual warm meetings, warm introductions with investors, and they save you a lot of time, right? But it's paid. You may pay $8,000, $10,000 to get into this sort of accelerators, right? So generally, it's not a bad deal, because once you get into such accelerator, you may get enough credits for various services that you are not only cost offset, but also get to learn a lot, build your network, and you get your investors, right? And obviously, there are other accelerators which have a lot of competition, but they pay you, they invest in you, right? Like at Chemist, Y Combinator, etc. So once you get your meetings, then you can pitch to investors and raise your funding, right? But if you get, say, about 30 meetings and you don't get any investment, then there is some problem with your business model, right? Generally speaking, if you do 20 to 30 meetings, you should be able to raise funding. So once you raise funding, then congratulations, right? You are the next obviously phase is growth. You have to put that capital to good use, and we can cover that maybe in a subsequent webinar. But congratulations of coming this far. You have built yourself a startup, right? Great job, and really congratulations if you came this far. But the point here is that there is a very, very, very clear path from a corporate job to own startup. You can you can totally do it. We are here to help you out. My whole panel is here to help you out. We'll be happy to be of service. Just one more thing I kind of missed. The equity plan, generally the equity is to be split equally among the co-founders. That's the rule of thumb. But obviously it depends on the expertise, exposure, and earning level of different resources as well. So, but the rule of thumb, the best practice is to have equal equity split. But if you're in different geographical boundaries, you can obviously have an asymmetric split. We have Osman Ghani with us. Osman, thank you so much for joining. If you can please, I gave you an intro, but if you can take a minute to introduce yourself, please.
Hello, assalamualaikum everyone. My name is Usman. I'm CTO of Avin. We do secured credit cards in US, and then I've been doing startups for the last 10 or so years. Gone through ups and downs, so seen pretty much everything. Pretty deeply embedded in the Valley culture, and so I can answer questions, take comments, anything you want to know. If you want advice to do startups, I can convince you. If you want advice against doing startups, I can convince you. But yeah.
Totally. Sounds good. Sounds awesome. So we'll enter into panel discussion. So this is a question for all three of you. That what advice would you give to your younger self if you were given back, say, 10 years and you have to start all over again? What advice would you give to your younger self? I would ask maybe Michael first, and then maybe we can go to Usman.
Sure. Well, let me say, first of all, I'm gonna, Epical is in somewhat of a unique position because almost all of our clients are some phase of their startup journey. So I'm going to answer this not only from my experience, but from what I see with them as well. I guess the first thing is have a plan and then expect it to change, sometimes drastically. A lot of times the companies that succeed the best and the fastest are ones that try something, realize it may not be exactly what they were expecting. They're not getting exactly the same results they're expecting. They pivot, they change, they go in a different direction. One of our clients right now, they had all the expertise in the world. It sounded like a great idea. They ran it for about 5 months, identified the problem is there, but it's not a problem that it's not a big enough of a pain that people are willing to change and pay for. So they've pivoted and gone in a different direction now, and they're being highly successful in the new direction they're going in. So that's one thing I would say, that don't get too married to your plan. Always have a plan, but don't get too married to it. Be open to change. And then the other thing is kind of following along with some of the others have said, is that get mentors or get advisors or get consultants to help you in this journey. Some of them you have to pay, some of them you don't, but get whatever you don't have a lot of experience with, get some advice on, because it will save you so much time and money in the long run.
Totally. And Usman, what would you advise yourself if you go back 10 years, say?
Most things don't work. If you got a good thing going, write it. One lesson I've learned in my life.
Very, very, very important lesson. Very important lesson.
Yeah.
This is so important, that when you have something that is growing exponentially, just make it go all the way, basically, right? That's so awesome.
Very hard to do it again.
Totally. Munir, what's your thought? What would you do differently?
So I think a lot of people don't value their corporate experience. Like every time I meet any FANG engineer who worked at Apple or Facebook, almost like 95% of them are miserable. They're like, oh, I just want to leave my job and I want to start a company. And especially engineers. And I think they don't realize that what opportunity they have right now. Instead of starting a company right away, they should maybe switch to product management, for example, and learn like how to build product. Because if they are engineers, they're trained engineers, they might not know how to build product, how to market. They should work a little bit in a growth team, for example, to learn like how growth works. So I think in the media, we don't value the corporate experience much, and maybe it's my own FOMO that I have not worked in a corporate for a long time. But I do think people should should get experience before they start a company.
Totally, yeah. I mean, experience certainly helps. I mean, you get on the right track much sooner, and you have a longer perseverance in your business if you have some corporate experience, right? Because you have dealt with a lot in your corporate experience. Totally. So the next question. So Munir and Michael happen to be I think you guys are solo founders, right? And Usman has worked with co-founders every time. So Usman, this is a question more for you, that how did you go about finding your co-founders? You had different founding teams in your last 2 startups, right?
Mostly friends. It's very hard to find somebody you don't know, who you haven't worked with, friends or colleagues, to actually then learn to work with them while also trying to do this other thing that's also unknown. So generally, it's usually a school relationship from school or work, or a long-running friendship or something like that. I have not worked on a project with somebody who I didn't for a long period of time, who I did not have some kind of common history with. So
perfect. So basically, trust, right? Somebody you can really, really trust, right?
Even if you don't trust them. So I think trust is overrated. Yeah, trust is overrated. It's not about trust. It takes a lot to figure out how other people work. It takes a long time.
I see. So you'd rather save that time. Yes,
no, it's not the save. It's like one other variable that you're going to add to something that you are already going into an unknown, and you add another variable, it makes it really hard to actually make it work. So trying to work through difficulties of working together, or the difficulties of the idea itself. stepping into a minefield. So you don't want to go to war like with people that you haven't trained with. So generally, like units train together before they go to war. So consider it like a war.
Excellent advice. Yeah, Michael, you were saying something.
Well, so the last company I did start it by myself, but then later on I did bring in partners as well, and they were all employees of mine at the time, and I put a little more emphasis on the trust than Usman does, because that was a very big deal for me, is actually finding some people that I could trust for this journey. Yeah, I mean, just I would say his point about learning somebody, how they work, being in the trenches with them, understanding the type of people that they really are, and knowing that you can depend on them and trust them were my conditions.
Sounds good. So the next question is around profitability. So how, and this is more for Munir and Michael, because you guys had profitable startups from day one, actually. So how did you balance the need to be innovative and still take risks while staying profitable?
I guess I can start. So that's a tricky one. The short answer is to just set aside some of your profits for research and experiments. That way you can work on some new ideas, new services without jeopardizing the business. But ultimately, you try and balance that innovation with the profitability, and I would just say don't be afraid to take calculated risks. But to your point earlier, always keep an eye on that profitability and that bottom line.
Totally.
Yeah, it's a delayed gratification. Creative people wants to create all the time. I think you have to be patient, and you have to set aside the budget, as Michael said. I totally agree. And take calculated risk. Make sure that your worst case scenario is covered. Yeah.
Next question, Usman, is for you. That from VC standpoint, what are the typical top 2 or 3 things you look at to determine that this company is meeting your bar, and this company basically you can say that from your perspective it's good to go from technical standpoint. So what do you look at, like top 2, 3 things?
Oh, you usually look at only 2 things: team and market. So the individual ideas early on actually don't matter as much, because like Michael said before, like these things change. So one, you need to have a team that, it's a few things, right? If you have an existing pedigree and track record, then you can actually bank on that as a team. And then market has to be really big that you're attacking. If the market is not big, then a very good team can also fail, because they're just like limited by how big the market is.
Total addressable market, right? That's what you're
Yeah. So, I mean, people do like all sorts of gymnastics to show their market is big, but you have to really truly look and make sure that their market is actually big, and not just the market, but the captured market that they're going to have. With this idea, so you can play in a very large market with a very niche idea, and then your market is actually small. So team and market are the only things that matter. There are certain ideas that are actually pure execution ideas. Like Boom is an idea, right? Like the supersonic jet that like it requires a very specific problem to be solved that hasn't been solved yet for it to work. But then the only thing you care about, and those ideas have to be in a big market, because there has to be value in solving a difficult problem. And then it comes down to basically like saying how good the team is. So it's easy to judge a team when they have a track record. It's harder to judge a team when they have no track record. They're out of college or whatever, right? So that's where like it gets really tricky. And then the way people do it generally is like, now there is a lot of like folklore on how to like judge these people, which leads to a lot of bias. But essentially, you're looking for early signs of the word that gets used is resourcefulness, which is what has this person done before in a non-professional capacity that indicates that they are resourceful and that they can get around. Like the word that's used in subcontinent terminology is jugadu. which is like the subcontinent way of saying resourceful. But that's essentially what you're looking for. It's hard. It's very hard to judge early. Generally, like by series A and B, you have a good idea of traction. Is this thing taking traction, even if it's not profitable, and can it become cash flow positive at some reasonable point in time in the future? Because for the thing with innovation is that you have to invest a lot early on. So it's like a J curve, right? You put money into a hole for a long time before it actually bears fruit. The reason you do that is because if something is actually innovative and great and you're discovering a new market, then you want to capture it before everybody else. So you don't want to stop for profitability too early. You should do it, but you shouldn't stop too early. Otherwise, somebody else, if it's a good idea, somebody else will just do it with more capital and just like take over your market, and then you're basically doing, you just have no market left. So it's when you find something really valuable that has traction, you should really go and capture everything very, very quickly, which means you have to put in a lot of money upfront before you get the value back.
Fair point. So basically, Usman and Munir both are living in the heart of Silicon Valley for, I don't know, like maybe a decade, right? So they have this visibility into how this whole valley is thinking, right? And especially Usman has been very integrated into the community. Munir is more focused on, his product and his trajectory, right? And Michael is based in Houston, right? So very, very different perspectives coming, so that we balance all this notion, right? So on one side, we have the notion of a startup growing very fast, growing very big, huge. On one side, we have the notion of a profitable business, stable, profitable from day one. Michael has this notion of, profitability from day one as well, and bringing partners and, later on, right? So just to balance this whole discussion, we have this awesome diverse notion. So I hope that everybody is taking notes and getting benefits, right? So the next question is that so in the early days of a startup, right, you will always have very very limited time, resources. You always have more things to do than you can possibly fit in your 24 hours, right, or your schedule, right? So how do you prioritize? So that's a question for all three of you. Maybe, Munir can go first. So how do you prioritize your tasks? What would you prioritize the highest and the next in the early days of your startup?
Yeah, I think I read somewhere that the key of success is to saying no 1,000 times and finding like one thing. And yeah, I was fortunate that I was introduced to this power law, the 80-20 rule, early on, that very few things produces the most of the results. Even in my previous company, I saw it was really like top 10% of the customers were producing 90% of the profit. So you have to do audit to your own schedule, your own energy, your attention span. We all have limited resources, right? So be very ruthless about where you pay attention to, and saying no to things. Be comfortable with saying no to things and no to people. That's the key, I think. And do really good due diligence. Like, will it produce a result? Will it take me to the next level where I want to go? Or is it just a distraction? Yeah.
Very, very wisely put together indeed. It's Michael, you want to add to it?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with everything Munir said. The power of no is, as an entrepreneur, there's so many things that sound good, right? There's so many opportunities. There's so many things you can chase after. Learning to say no is a skill set that you need to learn. Aside from that, just when you're looking at, there is an endless amount of tasks. There's an endless amount of things to be done. Instead of just looking at, what we typically do is, okay, what's the most urgent, and that's what we focus on, and whatever's not the most urgent or what we consider not important, it just usually never gets done. I would encourage you to take a look at those things just briefly, each one, and look at it from a couple of different dimensions, if you will. Look at it from, what is the potential profitability of each one of these? How fast can I get it done? What is the overall value to the 80% or to the 20% rather, that's actually going to be providing most of the revenue coming in? Which ones are, which one's going to bring the most value to my company and to what I'm trying to do, because you cannot get everything done. And then I guess the only other thing is, just learn to delegate also, because no one person can do it all. Again, don't hire just anyone. Hire people that you can trust to get things done. Give them the guidelines, and then let them do their job without micromanaging them too much.
Absolutely. That's a very important point, to decide to delegate, right? Get most done through your team, right? That's awesome, totally. Osman, would you add something to that?
Yeah, I mean, I think Munir and Michael talked about, once you know what the priority is, how to actually focus on it and kill distractions. Generally, your calendar is sort of your diary, right? It's like a resource. Time is your most important resource. Calendar is essentially a resource management tool, so you use it. But the important thing is figure out what actually is the priority. The way you do that is you essentially think of what's called the business equation, which is what are the variables that if you move them, your business actually gets better. And so you figure out those variables and only focus on them, and pick one of those variables that will get you. You have to sequence which ones to optimize first. And generally, people have this habit of actually picking the easiest thing to do because they know how to do it. So you actually have to pick the highest impact thing, and it's not necessarily the easiest. Most of the times, it's the hardest thing to do, and it's going to take the longest time. So it's important to resist the temptation to do things that you can do quickly early. It's like, oh, this is a simple thing I can do it in 2 hours. Don't do that. Those 2 hours you didn't spend thinking about the most important thing. And once you have the variables essentially, just say your business has 3 variables or 5 variables that you can change to change leverage. You just pick one of those, and then you just work on that. And then you optimize until you get to a point where you're like, okay, let me move to the next thing. And there's usually 3 things that you could be working on at some point in time. Your week should go to one of those 3 things, and then your day should go to basically your week should go to all those 3 things, or 2 out of those 3 things, and then your day should go to one of those 3 things. So every day you have one priority, you want to move on it 1 to 2 days, then you move to the next thing 1 to 2 days. And you can noodle on these things for a very long time. So you could work on something for very, very long periods of time, but it's important to create this time pressure on yourself to do small chunks of work really, really fast, because that forces constraints force actually really creative thinking very, very quickly under this artificial pressure. Otherwise, you will noodle on a problem for a very long period of time. So that's actually really important. So how to find what to work on, and then once you've found the thing to work on, how to work on it. I think if you combine all 3 people's advice, you will basically get to the answer. The specifics of what is important is based on what you're doing. So I can't tell you what it is.
Absolutely. That's an awesome way to put it together, that don't go for easy low-hanging fruits all the time. Go for the maximum impact, basically, right? And give yourself the right amount of time to make yourself successful in that. Right? That's awesome. So to team, our viewers, if you have any questions from Osman, Michael, or Munir, we have a few minutes, please, So before you leave, we have this offer for you guys. If anyone of you want to start a business or a startup, we are offering free of cost logo design service. So for up to 20 participants, 20 people. I'm going to share the link with you, and if you sign up to it, we'll be happy to do free services. Let me share the link with you. 1 second, please. It will be in this chat, and I'll be posting it on LinkedIn as well. So just let me share it right now. Second, please. Anyway, I'll share it on the LinkedIn. So please go there and sign up, and we'll be happy to provide you free logo design services worth $500, just to encourage you to get started. So yeah. So thank you so much. Any questions you might have, please feel free to ask. So okay, so there's a question that came. How to launch a startup as a solopreneur in USA while staying in Pakistan? So okay, Usman, thank you so much. Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate you joining. Usman wanted to drop just to answer the question that Mr. Gori asked, that how would you start a business in USA while sitting in Pakistan. Munir, do you think it's possible? Do you think that can be done?
Yeah, I think it's doable. I did that in my last company. It was most of my team members were in Pakistan, but my business was registered in the US. Majority of our clients were out of Pakistan, and that was our advantage because when you earn in foreign currency in a country like Pakistan, where the cost of living is very low and the value of a dollar is very high, you are able to hire good people. You're profitable. You can do more with the money. So it's definitely a really good hack for people who are in Pakistan. I always advise people to, if you want to leave your job, start with something that earns you in foreign currency, like a freelancing job or a remote job. And that way you can also build customers, connections. You identify, it's very hard to like solve a problem of person of companies in the United States while sitting in Pakistan. That is hard, but it's definitely possible technically to start a company. So what I did was I was lucky enough to get a visit visa, US visa, as soon as I graduated. And I used to travel a lot. I spent 3 to 6 months outside country. And that way I got exposed to different markets, different countries, different cultures, understood like how companies work before. That helped me a lot in selling my services and solutions. So even if you're in Pakistan, try to make revenue in foreign currency and travel a lot. That's my advice.
Awesome.
And I would just add, so if you're looking for funding, I mean, I think the best vehicle for funding is through a U.S. company, from my experience. So you can do that. I mean, I had a U.S. company, and then I've later formed a Pakistani company as a subsidiary of it. So there's different structures you can do and different ways you can approach it. But yeah, lots of opportunities.
Yeah.
So Rahil Noor is saying that he can help with setting up your company in USA if you like. So please connect with Rahil Noor. Rahil, if you can share your email address or something, contact information. Sounds good. Any other questions, folks? Yes.
Speaking of that, are you going to share, or at least our contact information, so if anybody does have any follow-up questions?
Oh, sure. Yeah. If you can please put let me put your email addresses so that if you want to contact Michael, Usman, or me, please do so. So this information will go away when we close the window, right? Please copy it before it goes away. So let me just. This is Michael's email address, and Munir already put his. And mine is kg@vincorp.com. Yes, please feel free to reach out to us if you have any questions or if you want any help with setting up your businesses. We'll be more than happy to help. All right. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you so much, Michael. And
Thank you,
so much,
everybody.
Munir.
Thank you, everyone.
Yeah.